The legendary Mega Evolutions Latios and Latias are making their way back to raid battles, and both of these can be incredibly difficult. In this video, I'm going to be telling you what the best counters are against each of them, and also giving you a couple of tips. Alright, how's it going everyone? It's me, it's Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day and welcome to today's Pokemon Go video. So today we're going to be talking about Mega Latios and Mega Latias. Both of these legendary Mega Evolutions are coming back to raid battles, and even though they are not necessarily as relevant as something like Mega Rayquaza or Mega Alakazam, they are still pretty good, so you will want to get the Mega Energy for both of them. Now, something to keep in mind is that both of these Mega Evolution raids are extremely difficult, and you will want to have a good number of trainers as well as the right counters. You should definitely not underestimate them because they can be very difficult to take down. And if you want to farm up Rare Candies and Rare Candy XL, they may not necessarily be the most efficient boss for you to farm up, but they do not return that often. So if you want to complete your Mega Evolution Pokedex, then you will want to raid these Pokemon for their Mega Energy. Now, something to keep in mind is that both Mega Latios and Mega Latias have the same typing, which means they're going to share the same resistances as well as weaknesses, so you could pretty much use the same team against both of them. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be talking about them individually so that you are best prepared for these really difficult raid bosses. Let's start off by talking about Mega Latios. This is a Dragon and Psychic type Pokemon, which means it's going to have a type weakness against Ice types, Bug types, Dark types, Ghost types, Fairy types, and Dragon types. First, let's go over the best Mega Evolutions that you could use. Without question, Mega Rayquaza is going to be insanely good against Mega Latios. Even though Mega Latios does pack Dragon type attacks, which are going to be super effective against Mega Rayquaza, the damage output of this one Pokemon is going to far exceed that. If you're going to be running Mega Rayquaza, make sure you're going with Dragon Tail and Outrage. Those are going to be the best moves against Mega Latios. The damage output is just insanely high. Now, if you're worried about getting hit by that super effective damage, then a good alternative is of course going to be Mega Tyranitar. You will want to bring one with Bite and Brutal Swing, and you're going to deal an insane amount of damage up against Mega Latios. That is of course because Mega Latios does have that Psychic typing. So if you bring this Pokemon with Bite and Brutal Swing, you're going to deal super effective damage as well as boost up all the other Dark types in your raid party. Another good alternative is going to be Mega Garchomp with Dragon type attacks, Mega Gardevoir with Fairy type attacks, and Mega Salamence with Dragon type attacks. All these Pokemon are great alternatives to both Mega Rayquaza as well as Mega Tyranitar, but ideally you will want to go with either of the first two. Next up, let's go over the best counters. Without question, Tyranitar with Bite and Brutal Swing is going to be a great option, especially if you have any shadow forms of this Pokemon. Dialga is also a really good option, specifically because it has the Steel typing, which means it's going to be resistant against most of Mega Latios' attacks. That's very key because it still deals a lot of damage, and because it has insanely high TDO, you're gonna last a lot longer in battle. Don't forget, like I said, this boss is incredibly difficult, so you will want to make sure you're bringing very bulky Pokemon because the longer you last in battle, the more effective you are going to be. Now, another great option is of course Hydreigon with Dragon Breath and Brutal Swing. Since both of these moves are super effective against Mega Latios, that's going to allow you to deal an insane amount of DPS. And another good option is Goldango with Hex and Shadow Ball. These are Ghost type attacks, which is going to make this Pokemon really strong against Mega Latios. But something to keep in mind is that there probably will be less synergy with Mega Evolutions, considering that most players will likely opt to go with either Mega Rayquaza or Mega Tyranitar. But if someone in your party is using a Mega Evolution with a Ghost type, then maybe Goldango is going to be a great option. So yeah, pretty straightforward. All you have to do is use your best Dark types or Dragon types, and that's going to get you the win. Now, there are other options that you could use, such as Ice types as well as Fairy types, but I highly suggest you go the Dragon type or Dark type route, especially because the damage output for both of these types are always insanely high compared to the other types. But there are plenty of options against both Mega Latios and Mega Latias, so you do have a lot of freedom to use whatever best Pokemon you have. But next, let's move on to Mega Latias, because even though they share the same typing, because of the different stats and moves that Mega Latias can bring, you can adjust your raid party with some different counters. Once again, let's talk about the Mega Evolutions. Instead of Mega Rayquaza being the absolute best in terms of damage output, it's going to be Mega Tyranitar. The reason for this is because the difference between Mega Latios and Mega Latias in that Mega Latias does not have access to different charge attacks that are going to be strong against Tyranitar. But something else to keep in mind is that Mega Latias is a little bit tankier and it does have much harder hitting dragon type attacks in its arsenal. So therefore, you will want to use caution when using dragon type Pokemon, even with the Mega Evolutions. Therefore, Mega Rayquaza is going to come in at number 2. Now, you could also use Mega Gardevoir and Mega Garchomp as well as Mega Salamence, but there is also the option of using Primal Groudon. And the reason for that is because Primal Groudon actually has access to a dragon type attack, and that is the fast attack Dragon Tail. You could pair this up with Precipice Blades and deal a lot of damage, even though Precipice Blades is not going to have super effective damage. Now, in terms of the counters for Mega Latias, they are relatively the same. You're going to have Tyranitar at the very top. Of course, Tyranitar is a very bulky Pokemon, and it does deal a lot of damage on top of it. So, it is a very solid option against both Mega Latios and Mega Latias. That is definitely one you will want to invest into, especially if any of your friends are running Dark-type Mega Evolutions. And the same goes for using Dialga. Much for the same reasons as Mega Latios, this Pokemon has a lot of TDO, and it does resist a lot of Mega Latias' attacks. So therefore, this Pokemon is definitely a great option to use against Mega Latias, especially if you do not have other really good dragon types or dark types in your collection. Goldango is once again another option that you could use, but like I said before, this Pokemon is not going to get a lot of synergy with Mega Evolution, so I would hold off on using any Goldangos, especially over any dark types or dragon types that you might have. Now, another surprising good option is actually going to be Zarude with dark type attacks. This Pokemon does deal a lot of damage innately, and it does have access to some very powerful dark type moves. And then finally, Hydreigon with dark type attacks is always going to be in the top 5 when it comes to dark type Pokemon, especially because in terms of damage, it is only going to be behind Tyranitar, so that is another option that you could use. But keep in mind that Mega Latias does have access to some very powerful dragon type attacks, so make sure you're paying attention to what charge attacks that Mega Latias is running with, because you will likely not want to use Hydreigon against big powerful dragon type attacks. So yeah, overall, very straightforward for both of these raid bosses. You will want to run with your best dragon types or dark types, and make sure you pair up with a bunch of people for these raids. Considering that both of these Pokemon have insanely high stats and are extremely tanky, you're going to want to deal as much damage as you possibly can. That means you will want to fully utilize weather boosts, friendship bonuses, and different things like that, as well as bringing as many trainers as you possibly could. My suggestion is that you run with about 5 to 7 trainers up against either of these raid bosses, and make sure all of those trainers are running the best dark types or dragon types. And also, make sure you all have Mega Evolutions as well. Now, in terms of challenging yourself, you could probably do this with 3 to 4 trainers, but again, these are extremely difficult, so you do not want to underestimate them. Make sure you're going in with a lot of numbers, because otherwise you're going to end up wasting raid passes, and that's not going to be a good thing. Yes, I totally recognize that both of these Pokemon are not going to be relevant, especially compared to Mega Rayquaza and Mega Alakazam, but they are still pretty good. There are many cases where I preferred not using Mega Energy for Mega Rayquaza or Mega Alakazam, and I needed a good second option, and in those instances, I would use either Mega Latios or Mega Latias. On top of that, they are also incredibly bulky compared to both of those Mega Evolutions that I mentioned before. Of course, Mega Rayquaza does have the highest stats output, but at least compared to Mega Alakazam, it's going to be a no-brainer that you will want to run with Mega Latios or Mega Latias in terms of TDO. And there's going to be plenty of players out there who do not have the Mega Energy to Mega Evolve Mega Rayquaza or Mega Alakazam, and for them, I would say that both of these Mega Evolutions are going to be incredibly useful until you can Mega Evolve those specific Pokemon. So yeah, don't ignore these Pokemon when they're in raid battles. They are still worth going after, in my opinion. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Now, if there was a helpful tip that I did not mention for both of these raid bosses, make sure you mention it down below in the comment section, and also tell me what your best Latios or Latias is in your collection. Let's have a great discussion, and best of luck going up against these raid bosses. And thank you so much for making it to this point in the video. If you ended up enjoying it, hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to be a supporter of my YouTube channel in any way, then go and check out the links in the description below. For every single member of my Patreon family, they get to play with me in Pokemon Go. I will always add my Patreon members on my friends list. That is the main perk for being a Patreon member, and I always try to send out gifts and raid invites as often as I can. So if you want to raid with me, do consider joining me on Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way, you could always do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula, and I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Alright, and with that said, that's going to be it. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.